Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automated. I, of course, am Stefan and I am back from a week off, and I am not yet a potato-peeling humanoid Chernobyl robot. Sitting across from me is a Chernobyl robot of some sort who's wearing a very stylish run-on Silicon Valley Bank t-shirt, I might add. Who exactly are you, sir?
I'm still wondering how we let you take a week off. That seems very out of character for us.
I only had about 5 hours of meetings during that week. It was a blissful time. Whereas my father says, wow, you had 5 hours of meetings in a week? As an old IC engineer. So I, again, am Stefan Oxmacher. We are the co-founders of Polymath Robotics, and this is Automated, our weekly podcast where we talk robots. Our podcast is in 2 parts. First, we'll play a game where we will spitball a robot into existence, and it will be a great robot that almost plays metal music, but doesn't quite. And then next, we'll talk about a topic this week that I'm actually very excited about and should excite you too, whether you're a business person, a product person, or an actual technical person who wants to make money, because we're going to talk about an upcoming initiative of ours called Requests for Robots with a couple of requests for a couple of robot types of things. So with that being said, let's have some sound effects and it's time for our game. So the way that we play our game every week is we draw 2 cards from a deck. One, and this is a bit of a simulation of what it's like to start a company in robotics. One card is a business or place or setting card, and the other is a technology that we either have to use or can't use. So I like to think of this as a CTO who has a deep technical expertise on some technology that he's either, or he or she is definitely going to use or definitely going to avoid. And the CEO who's like, oh, here's where we can monetize that. Mr. CEO over there, what type of place or setting or whatever are we going to use?
All right. So randomly drawing this one, we're going to get kitchen.
Kitchen.
And
so for that, oh, look at that. The card I just drove was compute off robot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. May or may not be the opposite of what the card said, what I just read. But kitchen robots where the compute is ported to somewhere else and somewhere central. And that's actually kind of neat because you could do a lot of things with relatively dumb devices and a centralized intelligence to them.
Well, yeah. I mean, the previous YC company, previous batch, I think it was the previous batch, Mesley was doing the automated food prep.
Yeah.
And like, that is exactly it, right? Fully roboticized kitchen. Yep. Generating.
But I think all of those actuators were connected to the computer who's making the decisions. I'm more thinking like I have a KitchenAid, I have a Samsung fridge, I have a, I don't know, water filter, and there's some central intelligence guiding all of their actions and making them all autonomous and smart.
And also, you know, inserting ads into your fridge and all
I
that
need
kind of
those ads. That's why I always used to know Philadelphia cream cheese and not one of those cheap off-brand competitors.
But how do we make a kind of a robotic side of this? Because appliances are appliances. We've talked about this before with kind of.
I mean, I think for some, so I think to restate, for something to be a robot, it needs to sense its environment. It needs to make decisions off of that environment. And then it needs to physically move through space in response to those sense-driven decisions.
Yep.
So perhaps what we could think about is maybe it's not your kitchen, which is a relatively controlled environment. Maybe it's like some sort of outdoor kitchen or some sort of like uncontrolled kitchen environment where it has to sense things real and on the fly.
Uncontrolled outdoor kitchen environment. All I can imagine is like oil fire in a oil barrel, kind of like, here's my kebab.
I mean, one option. So I know of a company that does preparation of meat on the vehicle that's collecting the meat.
In an oil drum, or
I always hazard to talk about individual companies because I can never remember who's public or not. But they say prepare animals for food processing while out in the broader field. So you could look at doing something like that. But this is supposed to be silly. So in college, I had some friends who loved to hunt deer and then prepare venison. There was one guy who always promised, because we went to school in Philadelphia, that he'd make venison cheesesteaks. I have yet to get those, Tom Wisda, so I'm waiting.
Was he hunting them with a rifle or with the front end of his car?
You know, it was never quite made clear.
Okay.
Or it could have been by hand. It was a different time. But maybe what we're looking for is for a series of robots that will prepare freshly shot deer into food that you might want to eat.
I think this is more post-apocalyptic than last week's Chernobyl robots. I'm just imagining this roving crab thing, which just comes over a deer and just strips it to pieces.
The compute has to be off board.
It has to be off board too.
So maybe it's that there's a number of different devices, one of which has the compute for all of them, but the rest kind of do their own thing along the way. So there might be like an AMR, a 6-wheel, a 6x6 drive AMR that drives from like, I've shot the deer. It drives out to the deer and starts to cart it back. And then there's different robots that, like, I don't know, take the skin off the deer.
This is horrifying. This is
separately at my campsite where I've been chilling and hunting. Something else might make a fire. And then at the command of that AMR, and then like as the leg or whatever of the deer is brought off, something makes it into a hot dog. And then the hot dog goes on the fire.
Because you're kind of thinking of offboard computing as off a particular robot.
Yeah,
right?
That seems easier because I probably don't have good connectivity in the woods.
Yeah, I was gonna say
in the woods of Pennsylvania.
this horrifying, like deer disassembling machine. If it just hiccups on the T-Mobile network and starts to disassemble, not a deer.
Like, some people theoretically hunt for food, and if you're hunting primarily for food, you probably have budget for $300,000 of hunting robots.
Yeah, I mean,
to prepare your food into meals.
This has a total addressable market of Dave, who lives in the woods.
3 rich hunters.
No, just Dave. Just a dude named Dave.
All right, so I think this is the move. There's like an AMR that has to cart the body, or at least like cart the large chunks of it. I think normally when you eat an animal, you're mostly eating like the muscle around its legs. So maybe it's just the AMR is just like lopping off the middle and the head and carting back the legs.
This is the grisliest robot we've ever made.
I mean, there's plenty of food robots. It's just when you talk about it as Bambi, it gets weird all of a sudden.
Yeah. When's Disney's rights on Bambi expiring? Can we please do a robot apocalypse version of that? A crossover of Bambi and Terminator, please.
The Bambi Terminator.
Yeah. Just excellent.
Right. So
somebody use AI out there to make this video, please.
What would we need to do this? So I think there's probably like a self-starting grill that needs to exist. AMRs and
fairly
AMR,
easy. Yeah.
Probably the actual food prep in an outdoor environment. And I'm just going to assume it's raining because anytime I do anything outdoors for an extended period of time, it's raining. So,
Stefan's excuse not to go outdoors.
So preparing the meat outdoors in the rain, it
has to be covered. Maybe it sets up a little tent or something. Like it sets up an auto little like clean room to do its grisly Dexter-like murder in, and then brings it down again.
Well, let's say for simplicity's sake, if we only need a hot dog from the deer, to be the opposite of the use of the buffalo.
So it's an AMR with one of those tree mulchers on it that's been repurposed.
Well, you don't want to mulch the bone, so you have to debone it.
I mean, what's a little bone in your hot dog? It's probably there anyway. You just gotta mulch fine enough. Mulch down to millimeter scale. You'll be fine.
So your AMR has to recognize deer legs, have a robotic arm to cleave the leg off, have a finer tuned robotic arm to cleave just the muscle off that leg. And I assume put it through a meat grinder to a meat processor to turn it into hot dog.
Actually, side note, we do have to wrap up, but side note on this, the meat prep industry has tried roboticizing for a long time, in particular handling carcasses and doing this disassembly that you're describing. Incredibly hard problem. Like totally.
Are you saying
unsolved.
all animals aren't identical?
No, it's even that they're fairly similar. The problem is actually handling a knife in such a way that you actually carve and don't just go right through, or don't put nearly enough force. Like it's actually so a fine art. So we'd have to solve some
open robotics problems just to take the meat off the bone.
Like it's incredibly hard torque control and pressure control, and like it's very challenging.
So as a VC told me the other day about another open robotics problem, that gets solved in 10 years. Whatever.
It's fine.
So
it's not like the meat processing industry will need this desperately.
No, the place to deploy this first is hunting.
Yeah.
Venison hot dogs from the get-go. So we've solved the robotic arm thing. We actually, make it simpler. We could cut off just enough meat from the leg. So we don't need to cut the whole leg off. Just enough meat from the leg for a hot dog. Throw that in a meat processor. And probably actually, if it's just a hot dog, heat the hot dog on the go, but then all of a sudden the compute's back on board.
Okay. I'm just going to wrap this up with the name of the product, which is Single Lakota Man's Tier, for using the least amount of an animal possible. 3,000, of course.
Or as Dwight Schrute would call it, hot dog on the go, or venison dog on the go.
There you go. All right. Now we're back from that grisly discussion topic. Let's get, hopefully,
and I would say,
away.
if out there you can make me a venison hot dog, I will happily eat it because it was delicious. But
now that we've scared away,
probably won't make it anymore.
Yeah. Now that we've scared away all 12 of our listeners, let's discuss.
11 of whom are vegetarian.
Yeah, of course.
And the other one's vegan.
Yeah. Let's discuss requests for robots.
Yeah. So funny thing about the robotics industry is everything is really hard. A line that I've been throwing around a lot with our internal team is when it comes to building software as a service, if you've seen a feature exist before, you can buy it as a microservice. There's a company who sells that feature. Whereas in robotics, if you've seen a feature before, adding that feature to your own product is a matter of inventing it. And it may be easier than where you've seen it before. It might be harder from where you've seen it before. And everything's just kind of hard all the time.
If you've seen it, more than likely you saw a horribly hard-coded demo of a thing that has no business being out in public.
Yeah, or shown to anybody.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the greatest demo of all time, which was back in the Ken Kesey days, when someone demoed a mouse and a browser and a keyboard, and it was like 1976, and it was like a solid 25 years until normal people had them. That's where robotics demos are at today.
That's exactly it.
So along those lines, what happened in the good old days of everyone raising $200 million before they had a product is they'd run into a large number of small niche problems, and then they just hire someone to hard code a solution. So one of these problems that we've actually since solved is remote starting a vehicle. And I'll get into that in a second. But essentially, as a company fairly early on, we ran into a particular niche problem, which is that we turn on vehicles that we don't want to be near. We turn them on all the time, and there isn't a chipset for us to just use. So basically, we kind of had to hack together a number of boards to be able to turn an engine on when issued a command over internet protocol. And we want to be a software company because investors love that statement way more than hardware. And that gets broken if you are starting to make custom boards.
Yeah. It's funny, only recently some cars, if you have some remote connectivity, you can remotely start them, like some passenger cars. But that sort of thing doesn't exist in a general sense. It's a Ford GM feature or a Tesla OnStar feature. Exactly.
They've opened up a public-facing UI for.
Or not even. It's like your special OnStar app.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
With horrible security, but that's a whole other question. But for industrial vehicles, nobody's ever needed to remotely start it because there's always a human driving it.
Yep.
So it's just never the need arises at the same time as the need for autonomy. And without one, you don't have the other. And so nobody's bothered to build this thing.
So to spell out exactly what the need we had was, we actually have a great contractor working on this board for us right now. But just to talk through this idea, and then we'll talk through another that's still an open problem. Essentially, our offices are in San Francisco. We have our teams mostly throughout the Bay Area. Our test field, our primary test robot, is in Modesto, about 100 miles to the southeast of where we are. And that's a very strategic amount of distance. In reality, for Polymath, one of our big risks when we talk to investors is that we become a consulting firm. We, hand code a lot of solutions to each customer, and a consulting firm would be a good way for us to make some money, but it's not a good way for us to create a lot of enterprise value. One thing about being a consulting firm is you spend a lot of time on site with your customers. That's not to say that we don't visit our customers and we don't like to meet our customers. We don't like to see our robots. But for us to scale as a business, we need to have, thousands of robots out there in the field. And maybe, Polymath has only seen in person tens or hundreds of those robots.
Yeah. Imagine if you wanted to bring up your laptop and a dude from Microsoft had to come in with a USB stick and hand bring up your laptop. That's the kind of thing.
So by placing our test vehicle in Modesto, we placed it just far enough away that it kind of ruins your day if you get told you have to drive to Modesto tomorrow, and just close enough that if we have an important demo tomorrow at 9 a.m., you can fix the robot before then. And that's worked pretty well for us. At this point, we only visit that tractor
every few months.
Yeah.
I don't really track
usually every 2 or so at this point. Maybe sometimes we've gotten 3 months without visiting our robot in person, which is a great party trick to investors who are in the know. But that being said, we actually need to turn our tractor on every day. The tractor dealership that we're in the backyard of is nice enough to have someone who will, refuel us, plug us in or unplug us from shore power, but we need to turn on the engine remotely. So Ilia, what are the different versions of what we've done here? Or the requirements, at least.
So the requirement is very simple. It's anywhere in the world, because we want this thing to be a good stopgap solution for our future customers too.
So whether they're in Modesto or Australia.
Or exactly. To basically flip a switch. Most of these engine ignition boil down to when you turn a key, you're flipping a switch.
Yep.
And that switch might need to support 40 or 50 amps. So it's magic internet signal to turn on a switch is the bulk of it. The only caveat
Seems like really groundbreaking stuff. Nobel Prizes awarded for this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. The only caveat is some of these vehicles can sit in the field unused for months.
Yeah.
So the thing has to sip power and check in every once in a while.
Or even our stages today, like it might sit for 2 days, 3 days.
Or a week sometimes, right? So just those 3 requirements of doesn't use a ton of power anywhere in the world, functionally anywhere in the world works, and flips a switch, does not exist. Even from companies who specialize in
desperately wanted to buy this.
Yeah.
Desperately wanted to buy this. This is not core polymath tech. We desperately wanted to just swipe a credit card and have a board that does this.
Yeah. And I talked with a bunch of companies that do asset tracking things. So now there's enough groups out there where
you plug a little dongle into a CAN board and
exactly.
spit out GPS to a smartphone app.
Yeah, so they already have the anywhere connectivity. They already have the metrics. They already have that. They don't have a way to flip a switch.
Yep.
And they don't have a way for that thing to be active if somebody's not driving the vehicle.
Unclaimed Nobel Prize.
Yeah. So it's just crazy.
This is, in a nutshell, the entire idea behind Request for Robots. Is there's a whole bunch of these weird little niche requirements that, frankly, if somebody built, are they going to make $1 billion? No. But as robots become more real, as autonomous systems become more real, there's going to be real money in being the person who makes this board.
Yeah, because it's not just us. Anybody who's trying to automate equipment that doesn't have this built in is going to need something like this.
Yep.
It can't be your computer. It would kill your battery too quickly.
Yep.
Can't be your modem. Same problem.
Yep.
It has to be some little power sipping thing.
Yep.
Doesn't exist.
So I think we've built, how many of these have we built ourselves?
Like 3 versions.
The most recent one.
Wasted time.
We installed and we realized we wanted to put it under the hood, but we didn't have any housing. And, Modesto being a 2-hour drive away meant someone was stressing at the end of their day. So they basically grabbed a piece of scrap cardboard and wrapped our chipset in the scrap cardboard, put it under the hood.
Cardboard box.
Yeah.
Cardboard aided design.
And that lasted for 3 to 6 months.
6 months. That lasted for 6 months. If anybody's curious, reach out to us. We'll throw you the picture of an inch of dust cake on this thing.
Terrible.
It was amazing.
How did this thing work this long?
Yeah, it was shocking. I completely had forgotten that it was at that state of uselessness.
Yeah.
But it just kept on ticking until it didn't.
And basically that one just had an LTE SIM card, a small antenna, a very, very lightweight power draw.
Yeah.
Just to then, if it got a signal through its IP, through the internet connection, it would
flip the
switch. And once the switch was flipped, the engine would turn on, that would power the computer, and we could talk to the thing normally.
Exactly.
So, and for this particular project, we ended up getting a lot of responses to an investor update where we asked about it, and have a guy who's building a couple of these as an all-in board for us. But there's a number of these projects that exist. Another short one to mention before going into too much detail on a third one is basically e-stops over IP.
So to be clear, there is a company who builds this.
Yep.
Fort Robotics builds this. Other groups are looking at it.
Build good ones.
Good ones.
Yep.
Really, really good ones. Amazing. Highly recommend you talk to them if you need a serious thing. We need a non-serious thing that Stefan can walk around with on a trade show floor.
Yep.
That would just tell the robot that I don't care what you're being commanded to. Don't execute that command.
Yeah.
It's not a safety system. It's just a way for Stefan to give an iPad to someone who's driving around the robot and independently kill the machine because they're doing something
spits out
stupid.
a little heartbeat, and I can make it stop spitting out a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Again, I hand built a dozen of these things for our entire team. All of them are USB connected.
Ilia's Fun Time E-Stop Company is what I like to call it.
Yeah, it's lots of fun. It's evenings and weekends well spent. But they're all USB-C connected, and they'll require a ROS driver. And Stefan, being Stefan, doesn't run a Linux machine.
Yeah.
So
Weirdly.
Yes, especially his iPad.
Yeah.
So an independent LT
because
version.
as a matter of fact, what Ilia referred to is it's not uncommon for us to go to trade shows and for me to just walk around the trade show floor running our test tractor off my iPad and handing control of it over to any Tom, Dick, or Harry who's standing near me.
Yeah.
So the ability to do that while still having an e-stop would, be helpful.
Be nice.
So let's talk about the actual first main request for robots that we have. So many of you may or may not know about the yard truck industry. So a yard truck or a terminal tractor or a yard hustler or a yard hostler, depending on where you are, is kind of like a little mini version of a Class 8 truck. Now, when you think of a Class 8 truck, you can sometimes call it a tractor trailer. That's because there's two parts. There's the tractor or the power unit, which has the engine and the guys sleeping in it. And then there's the trailer that pulls your Doritos to your local 7-Eleven. Now, one way that you move trailers around from one factory to another is called dropping and hooking, which is where the tractor comes in, drops off the trailer, picks up a new trailer, and leaves, which is far more efficient. In reality, a lot of the times the tractors are stuck to the trailers and, they wait for like 6 hours to get unloaded, which is a bad time if you're a truck driver.
So you're saying the trucking industry has a hooking problem?
In more ways than one. For the organizations that do drop and hook, they use these little tractors called yard jockeys, yard hostlers, terminal tractors, whatever, which are basically just a power unit with a door in the back. The terminal tractor will pull up to the trailer. The guy will reach his hands out the door, connect the air brakes and the power cable between the tractor and the trailer, and then drive it to the next place and unconnect those air brakes and power cable and go on their business. The thing is, the airlines are incredibly important. So the way that trailers are designed is that if there is no air running through the airlines, the brakes are fully engaged. You cannot move them without air.
It's a safety feature.
Yep. So in order to automate yard jockey trucks, you have to be able to make this connection. In the world, there's a couple of companies who are trying to automate yard trucks. And I've seen a number of their pitches. I've talked to investors who are looking at investing in them. I've had inbounds from people who want us to do this work. In my previous life, I had people who wanted us to do this work. And in general, the way that most non-technical people or non-industry people, actually more importantly, look at the problem of yard trucks is they say, oh, this is an easy autonomy problem. You're an autonomous truck, but you never have to be on the highway. You never have to drive by a school. You never have to deal with open traffic. The real problem is you're a incredibly hard robotics arm product because the connection point between the airlines and the trailer are non-uniform. There's an 80-20 rule, but if you're, say, a large retailer, you might have any trailer in America show up at your distribution center tomorrow. And the last 10 to 20% of trailers, how you actually connect to them might be very different. Where those connections are very different. This is a robotics arm problem outside in the rain sometimes, at night sometimes. It's a similar problem to trying to debone a deer leg, except you have to be able to do it in roughly 30 seconds and get on your day.
And they're greasy and full of grime and just the seals are failing and it's just horrible conditions.
I just the other day had to send a rejection email to Fortune 50, Fortune 100, Fortune 5, big company saying, yeah, guys, this isn't solvable because there is no robotics arm company that does this.
And there are companies who are trying to solve this problem, but they're solving the whole yard truck problem.
They're retrofitting yard trucks. They're building robotic arms. They're building perception for robotic arms. They're doing path planning for robotic arms. They're doing path planning for yard trucks. They're doing fleet management for yard trucks. And it turns out that none of them are all that great at any of it.
Yeah, because it's too much. Robotics is too early to tackle that much stuff and have any chance of success.
I've heard of some companies that were 50 plus people bumped into this robotics arm company and realized, oh, crud, we have to hire 20 arm people.
Yep.
And just kind of got stuck at that point.
Yeah.
And it's one of those problems that always seems just beyond reach.
Yep.
So all that's to say, if you and your best friends decided to quit your jobs today and build a robotic arm company that could solve this glad hands problem, as I refer to it, because that's what the air brake connectors are, that itself could be $1 billion company. You'd have to be able to detect where the connecting points are. You'd have to be able to manage a robotic arm. You'd have to be able to connect the glad hands and disconnect them. And you'd have to be able to take commands from some sort of, API or from some machine that says, hey, it's time for you to connect or to disconnect. And that's hard, but that's about it.
It's bounded.
Yeah.
It's very bounded, and it's doable with a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very specific necessary problem.
And I think the challenge is there's 3 to 5 trailer companies that make up 80% of the market and are fairly uniform.
Yeah.
But for the big retailers or the big ports, the big whoever, they literally can't buy autonomy in yard trucks until you can solve any trailer they'll ever deal with. And any trailer they'll ever deal with in North America is 20 million odd trailers.
Without using an adapter kit.
Yeah. Well,
very against adapter.
We think adapter kits are a good solution, but that Fortune 50 company said absolutely not, never. So that, that's one path.
Can't do that. Yeah. But yeah, so we've been thinking of opening up this request for robots kind of system to the world and see who we get caught in our net of interest.
We own requestforrobots.com. And at some point, probably by the time this episode's live, there will be a fledgling website there where you too can say, here's a weird chipset that I need for robotics. Here's a weird feature that I need something built. Another one that we've thought about is we need a specialized VPN to be able to talk to our robots.
Yes. Not just VPN. There's a whole discussion here on like a set-top box for robots, like network management at a server farm, but for robots. We need somebody to start building that.
We have too many of these ideas to even cover in one of these podcast sections, which is why we've ran a little bit late. But if you're interested in working on any of them, please reach out to us. And if, on the other hand, you have problems as well, please feel free to add them to the list. Our hope is that this can help enable the robotics industry to have tools that let us move faster.
Absolutely.
And with that, Ilia, what are we talking about next week?
We are probably going to talk about a robotics related theme.
Really?
It's a good guess.
That seems like a massive breach from our normal celebrity gossip.
It's outside of our core competency, but we'll get there. What was the term? Off-brand.
Off-brand robotics. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this week, and we'll all talk to you soon.
See you next time.